Onward, Christian soldiers, marching as to war, with the cross of Jesus going on before. Christ the royal master leads against the foe. Forward into battle, see his banners go. Onward, Christian soldiers, marching as to war, with the cross of Jesus going on before. Oh, for a faith that will not shrink, though pressed by every foe, that will not tremble on the brink of any earthly woe, that will not murmur or complain beneath a chastening rod, but in the hour of grief or pain will lean upon its God. A faith that shines more bright and clear when tempest rage without, that when in danger knows no fear, in darkness feels no doubt. Lord, give us such a faith as this, and then whatever may come, we'll taste and hear the hallowed bliss of an eternal home. A charge to keep I have, a God to glorify, a never-dying soul to save, and fitted for the sky, to serve the present age, my calling to fulfill. Oh, may it all my powers engage to do my Master's will. Arm me with jealous care, as in thy sight to live, and O thy servant, Lord, prepare a strict account to give. Help me to watch and pray, and on thyself rely. Assured if I my trust betray, I shall forever die. Rise up, O men of God, have done with lesser things. Give heart and mind and soul and strength to serve the King of Kings. Rise up, O men of God, his kingdom tarries long. Bring in the day of brotherhood and end the night of wrong. Rise up, O men of God, the church for you doth wait. Her strength unequal to her task, rise up and make her great. Lift high the cross of Christ, tread where his feet have trod. As brothers of the Son of Man, rise up, O men of God.
Good evening. Let's edify one another, shall we? Hello, Reba. Hello, Maureen. Good to see you, sisters. CJ's in the background. We'll even say it's good to see him, although I'm not sure I'm too tickled with him because he's the one that woke me up after such a late night. I mean, after all, I am the one that sent him a message saying, I'm going to bed. That was at 6 o'clock my time. I said specifically at 6 o'clock in the morning my time. I'm going to bed now. He keeps looking around as if he's all innocent and all that. Nope. Ain't going to work here. And don't even try to pull a Sean on him. There is no defense. You got glasses, buddy. You could read the message. The joys of working for the Lord when we get to work with people we love, right? Oh. And we do love CJ. We got to give him some grief anyway. He is our taskmaster. I do too, CJ. I kind of agree with her because, I mean, that was $30, $40, maybe even $60 more when, you bought it later. All right, guys. We are going to welcome you to another. Yes, I know I'm 20 minutes late. My brother's here, and so I was finishing up a chat with him and had a good visit with him. Anyhow, yes, just so you know, I got 5 brothers and 1 sister. And so anytime I get a chance to chat with my brothers, I take that opportunity. This brother and I, we kind of are like partners in crime for a lot of things. Him and I work very well together. We sing very well together. I wish I could get him to sing some. Anyway. And so we have a lot of fun together when we get together. Don't get us started brainstorming because, man, oh man, the world will never be the same. But anyhow, we're here to study Genesis. And so without further ado, it's been a couple weeks, so we're going to just kind of rehash real quickly. Genesis 1 through Genesis 14, what we saw was the creation of the world. We saw the creation of man. We saw the fall of man through the deception of Satan, deceiving the woman, and man's direct disobedience, willful disobedience to the command of God, as he took of the fruit that Eve, his wife, gave him. We saw the punishment of man, as God drove them from the garden and required that they buckle down, and earn a living, toiling in the sweat of the brow as they strove to cause the earth to bring forth of its goodness. We saw the first murder as brother killed brother. We saw the taking the punishment fit the crime, as God drove him from the life that he knew and into a life of wandering far, far from his family. We saw also the men beginning to call upon the name of the Lord. We saw the first sacrifices. We saw the destruction of the world as the sons of God, those who were righteous, those who devoted their life to following God, happening to cast their eyes upon the daughters of men, that is, the offspring of those who were not following God, and where then the sons of God were led astray. and man's imagination became darkened and became wicked from his youth. Not from his birth, from his youth. We saw the destruction of the earth, the entirety of the earth, with the salvation of only 8 souls through the preparation of an ark at the command of God. And we have seen the earth being repopulated. We saw the covenant of God with the earth that is immortalized through the rainbow, a rainbow that signifies every time it rains that God will never again destroy the entirety of the earth through a flood. We saw man striving to disobey God again by congregating together, building a tower that was going to reach unto heaven, and refusing to spread abroad and to populate the entirety of the earth in direct violation of God's command, and God changing or confusing the languages as a result of that. And of course, all that culminated in the arrival of a faithful man known as Noah upon the scene, where we have taken up a microscopic view from the overall view of the creation of the world and its destruction and repopulation, down now to the microscopic as we follow one man and his journeys through his life. So we begin to watch Abram and his wife Sarai as they travel, along with his nephew Lot and his wife and all of his substance, as they are traveling to a land that God will show them. And we pick up then in Genesis chapter 15, where God speaks to Abram again, and this time as he is sitting once more, having rescued Lot, God being with Abram. They have rescued Lot and all of the citizens of Sodom and Gomorrah and the cities of the plain from the 4 kings, Chedorlaomer, king of Elam, Tidal, king of nations, Amraphel, king of Shinar, and Arioch, king of Elasar. Interesting thing I don't think I brought out, but Amraphel, king of Shinar, was the king of the land wherein the descendants, or the actually ancestors of Abram, were from. Shinar is the land where Ur of the Chaldeans was located. But anyway, Amraphel and Tidal, Chedorlaomer, and Arioch subdued the 5 kings of the valley. That is the king of Sodom, the king of Gomorrah, the king of Admah, the king of Zeboam, and the king of Bela, which is also known as Zoar. And Abram hears news of this and goes off with his 318 souls, servants trained for fighting. These are his servants, in addition to those with him from Mamre and Eshcol. We saw here in 4 verse 13. We have Amri the Amorite and Eshcol the brother of Aner, and they went with him and his 317, 18. Where were we? 318 souls, servants, and rescued him. And as they come back, Sodom comes to meet him, offers him all of the goods, just simply return the people. And he does that before Melchizedek, king of Salem. here at the Valley of Sheva, which is the King's Dale. Melchizedek is known as a priest king. He is priest of the Most High God. He is also king of Salem. This is an unusual situation. King of Sodom is not known as a priest to his God. Kedorlaomer is not known as a priest to his God. So Melchizedek is a unique individual because he is a priest and a king. And if you notice that the Levites were never, as we go into the following this in the history of Israel, the Levites were never kings. So there was never again a priest king between Melchizedek and the time that Christ comes. And so when Christ, who is of the kingly tribe of Judah, comes on the scene, and the Hebrew writer tells us that God appointed him a king after the order of Melchizedek. He's a priest after the order of Melchizedek, which means then that not only is he king because of David his father, but he's also a priest because of God his father. So it's unique because there's only two priest kings ever recorded in the Bible, that being Melchizedek and our current priest king, Jesus. And both of them were priests of the Most High. And of course, we have in this instant here of Genesis 14, verses 18 and following, where Abram gives a tenth of all that he has, of all the goods that he received. He gives that to Melchizedek as a tithe unto the Lord Most High. And that tenth is another thing that will play a big important part in the law of Moses later on down the line. And in fact, again, it is something that is referenced by, I believe it is the Hebrew writer, if not by Paul, specifically by the Hebrew writer, when he tells us that that Levi, the tribe of Levi, gave a tithe to God through Abram, when Abram gave tithes to Melchizedek. So, bringing all those interesting things out, we continue in Genesis 15. After these things, the word of the Lord comes to Abram in a vision, and he says to Abram, as he says to a lot of individuals throughout the entirety of man's history, fear not, I am your shield, or I am with you. And he says to Abram, I am your shield and your exceeding great reward. We've noted before in other classes, not necessarily here in Genesis class, but in other classes, that faith is a belief in God, that God exists, and that God rewards those who diligently seek him. And God comes to Abram and he says, fear not, I exist as your shield and your great reward. Now, remember, Abram is noted as a man of faith in Hebrews 11 because of the fact that he got up and he went by faith, leaving his father and his kinsmen and his country. He goes to a land that God promises him. And so Abram defines faith in its conciseness. And God says, fear not. Don't be afraid, because I exist. I exist as your shield, and I exist as your great reward. You have diligently sought me, and so here I am. But Abram says, well, that's all well and good, but what will you give me, seeing I go childless, and the steward of my house is this Eliezer of Damascus? In the patriarchal culture, and even all the way up until essentially way up until the Revolutionary War era in our country, and perhaps even further than that, but in that time period specifically, one of the things that is very prominent in society is that if you do not have a son to carry on your name, then you are nothing. Your name's going to die out. And Abram says, my name's going to die out because I don't have a child. And the only one that is heir, the only one that's going to get all my stuff is my steward. I have no one to leave this to. So what, so what kind of a reward am I going to get? God says, I'm your reward. It's almost as if name your reward. And Abraham says, well, what is there? I'm childless, and everything that I have is going to go to this steward because you haven't given me a seed. Verse 3. So God comes to him in verse 4, and he says to him, he says, this is, Eliezer, this is not your heir. He may be a good man, but he's not going to be your heir. He says, but the one who comes out of your own bowels shall be your heir. We can see Abram kind of struggling with that because Abram is old. But Abram also has one thing that is important that we need to develop as well. Remember, Hebrews 11 says that Abram did all this by faith. See here in verse 8, by faith, when he was called to go out into a place which he should after receive for an inheritance, obeyed, and he went out not knowing whither he went. It was by faith that he lived in the land of promise as in a strange country, dwelling in tabernacles and tents, in other words, with Isaac and Jacob, the heirs with him of the same promise. Because he believed in that city which has foundations, but whose builder and maker is God. He believed in God to the point that it didn't matter that he had no permanent house here on this earth. That he didn't have 1,000 acres to call his own. He didn't even have 2 acres to call his own. But he believed so strongly in God's promise that he went and that he did. In fact, it was such a strong faith that even Sarah herself had that faith. She didn't have Abram's faith. She had her own faith. And she received strength to conceive and was delivered of a child when she was past age because she judged him faithful who had promised. And therefore there sprang there even of one, and him as good as dead. In other words, he was old. He was well beyond the childbearing age. So many as the stars of heaven came from that one man who was well beyond the childbearing age. Indeed, and so was she. Because they both judged him faithful. So God brings him out and he says, out of the tent, he says, now look toward the heaven and tell me the number of the stars, if you can number them. And of course, Abram is not able to number the stars. There's too many of them to count. You ever gone out on a very dark night and looked up at the stars? I mean, CJ, I think, I know he's been up at camp and stuff, and so he knows exactly what I'm talking about. I mean, when he walked out the door here at our place in October, and you look up, we are so far removed from city lights, and that you look straight up and you see nothing but dark sky with full peppered with lights, with stars. It's hard. I mean, you're not going to be able to count all those, and not even a small patch of sky. And God says, tell me the number of them. And this is going to be how many your descendants are going to be. And one of the most important verses that is reused in the New Testament, and he believed in the Lord, and he counted it, and God counted it to him for righteousness. What is righteousness? Believing that God means what he says. It is a righteous work. It is a righteous act. Now, God doesn't stop there. He goes on. He says, I'm the one that brought you out of Ur of the Chaldees to give you this land to inherit it. So Abram says, Lord, how am I going to know that I'm going to inherit it? I look all around me. How am I going to know that this is mine? I need some tangible proof. So what does God do? There are times when in our life we accept things at face value. Okay, it's because we know that this is what happened, that we know that this is going to happen because this is what God said was going to happen. We accept that at face value. But there are other times when we need tangible proof. Does God castigate? Does he jump upon Abram for disbelief? Yes, he just said that he believed him, and it was counted, and God counted it to him for righteousness. But then he goes on to say, but whereby shall I know that I shall inherit it? Does God treat that as a measure of disbelief? To ask for proof or to ask for confirmation? Is that a measure of disbelief? So, if you tell me that you're going to do something, CJ, let's say that you tell me you're going to come out here again in October, this October. And I believe you. But I says, now, how am I going to know that you're going to come out here in October? I mean, it's all well and good for you to say that now, but how am I going to know for sure that you're going to come out here? Am I doubting your word? What do you think, Maureen, Reba? Am I doubting CJ's word? Am I calling CJ a liar?
Even in Genesis chapter 9, God does the same thing with Noah. He confirms his oath with a sign, with a rainbow.
Right. He confirms his oath. But but he didn't necessarily swear in that this land was going to be. He didn't say, "I swear to give thee this land."
Well, he said, "I will give it."
But he didn't swear. Maureen says a lot can happen between now and then. Well, yeah, between now and October, a lot can happen. See, the difference, CJ, between Genesis 9 and Genesis 15 is this. I establish my covenant with you and your seed after you. In other words, I swear that I'm not going to, or here is my covenant, here is my promise, here is my oath, that I will never destroy the earth with that again. It's different. It's different language than what he's saying here in Genesis 15:7. And you're right. Just because a person asks for confirmation does not mean he doubts the word of another, but rather that he wants confirmation. He wants he wants verification, or it would be the similar thing to us. He wants collateral, if you will. Surety that it's going to happen. And God says, I am the Lord. He sets off by saying, I am. I'm the one that brought you out. I told you when I called you that I was going to lead you to a land which, that I would give you. And this is the land, is what God is saying. And so Abraham says, I'd like to have confirmation that this will be my land. When I go and I purchase a vehicle, I want a deed of sale. The title is not sufficient. I need to have a bill of sale from the individual that I'm purchasing it from. stating that I have bought this vehicle from them for X amount of dollars. Because a title just simply states that I have a right to the vehicle. But a title can be stolen. And, or it can be found. And so it can be a case of misappropriation. And what Abram is saying is, I want a bill of sale. So what God says is this. He says, take me and heifer, 3 years old, a she-goat 3 years old, a ram of 3 years old, and a turtle dove and a young pigeon. And so Abram takes all those, and he divides them in the midst and lays them one against another. Of course, the birds, he didn't divide them because they're too small. But he takes them and he divides the ones that he can divide, and he lays the others, opposite. He lays the halves opposite each other, and he lays the birds opposite each other. So when the birds of the air come down to feast upon the carcasses, Abram drives them away. And then as the sun goes down, a deep sleep falls upon Abram, and a great horror of darkness, or a horror of great darkness, fell upon him. He goes into sleep, and he becomes very terrified. Dread of great darkness. So a great darkness of dread fell upon him. So in other words, the darkness, when he went to sleep, his dreams were very dark and dreadful. Or his vision was very dark and dreadful. Or, he was very, very much in fear. And God says to him, know of a surety that your seed shall be a stranger in the land that is not theirs. God gives him a prophecy. Here's what's going to happen, Abram. Your descendants are going to be a stranger in a land that is not theirs, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years. And also that nation whom they shall serve will I judge, and afterward shall they come out with great substance. And you shall go to your fathers in peace. You shall be buried in a good old age. But in the 4th generation they shall come hither again, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet full. So God gives him a prophecy, and it's a sure prophecy. And he gives him signs. Abram, you're going to die peacefully. But your descendants are going to go out, and they're going to become enslaved. And they're going to be enslaved for 400 years. But 4 generations after they go into slavery, or into this land which is not theirs, they are going to come out, and they are going to be my judgment against the Amorites. Now, it comes to pass that when the sun was going down, it was dark. Behold, a smoking furnace, a burning lamp that passed between these pieces. And the same day the Lord made a covenant. So herein is Abram's deed, if you will, or not deed, his bill of sale, his covenant with God. Unto your seed I have given this land from the river of Egypt unto the great river, the river Euphrates, the Kenites, the Kenizzites, the Cadmonites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Rephaims, the Amorites, and the Canaanites, and the Girgashites, and the Jebusites. So all of this land, everybody that's in it, all of these lands is going to be yours. And here's my covenant. And it was a covenant sealed in what? It was a covenant sealed in. Right. There would be blood there. Remember that a covenant was sanctified or was established through usually through blood or through well, it was through other means as well, but the more severe, the more binding ones were done through blood. That is why the Mosaical law was bound via blood, the blood of the testator. Well, not the testator, but the blood. Moses, when he dedicated the law, he did so through the sacrifice of blood of bulls and goats. Jesus, when he established his law, the new covenant, he did so with his own blood, and the Hebrew writer brings that out very clearly. So this was a very, was a binding covenant. Let's see here. This way of making a covenant was prevalent among many ancient nations. The Hebrew words translated as make a covenant mean literally to cut a covenant. So let's look at that real quick. It comes from karath, which means to cut off, down, or asunder, by implication to destroy or consume, specifically to covenant. That is, to make an alliance or bargain, originally by cutting flesh and passing between the pieces. Be chewed, be confederate, to be covenant, to be cut off, be cut down, destroy, fail, to make a league. And so what we see then, again, is, and that's a really fascinating one, isn't it, CJ? Never knew that one, did we?
It's really interesting if you consider that in light of Ephesians 2, where he's abolished the old covenant through his flesh and made a new one.
Yeah, I wonder if that's going to be a little bit different because of the Greek or not. That'd bear some studying, wouldn't it? Interesting. The word for covenant or berith comes from a word which means to eat and reflects the practice of the parties to a covenant eating together after passing between the cut pieces of animals. And I'll go and look at that real quick as well, just because. I don't want to say, I want to make sure that we are one speaking. Well, that doesn't say anything about eating, but it is berith. So it really doesn't say anything about eating. But it says it comes from H1262, which is bara, and that does mean to feed, as is equivalent to H1305, to render clear. So they are correct in that the root of the word for berith was bara, which means to feed. So this method is alluded to by Jeremiah in the case of Israel at Mount Sinai, Jeremiah 34, verse 18. Jeremiah, who wrote Lamentations, 34, verse 18. Whoops. And I will give the men that have transgressed my covenant, which have not performed the words of the covenant which they had made before me when they cut the calf in twain and passed between the parts thereof. Dude, I got to put that one down for... Never made that connection before, and I should have, because, anyway. Isaiah 15, verse... Was that 8? That was 18. Editors, Jeremiah 34:18. All right. So, now here in Abram's day, the normal pattern of both passing between the pieces was not followed because only God did so. The difference is because although there were two parties, as in all covenants, in this covenant that God was making, Abram did not stand on an equality with God. I disagree with them in one aspect of that, and that is the fact that who was doing the driving away of the birds? Who drove away the birds? Abram drove away the birds. And so he would have had to pass between the pieces to do that to a degree, would he not? So, in essence, he had already passed through the pieces. Um, so, in that regard, I don't agree with him. Now, I do agree that they weren't standing on equal footing, but God does extend this agreement to his servant Abram because through grace, through favor. Now, we go through and we look at the prophecy, and I'll pick up actually next week with the prophecy in verses 13 and following, because it's an important prophecy to look at. And it's time for me to get in and get ready for reading. But let's pick up there next week, and we'll go over a few questions from chapters 11 through 15, and then jump into 16 through 19. So if you want to read ahead, read chapters 16 through 19, and be ready. And as a refresher, just go over chapters 11 through 15, and I'll ask a few questions from my book. Hopefully you have been edified through our time in Genesis, as short as it was. I recognize that. I do apologize again, but I'm not too like I said, my brother was here, so I'm not gonna be too repentant on that part, because time with my brother is rather scarce. So, and so 20 minutes. I do apologize for being so tardy. Probably could have been in here 10 minutes earlier, except I was conversing with CJ, trying to figure out where I'd left off. Right, CJ? And anyway, so we'll pick up there. Like I said, I hope and pray that you've been edified through our discussion, through our study of Genesis. We didn't get a whole lot covered today, but we'll get more covered next time. As you go through and as you read the book of Genesis, and indeed the entirety of the book, remember that we are not here to be approved by one another. Our goal throughout all of our study in the book, the Word of God in the Bible, is to be studied, or is rather to give diligence to show ourselves approved by God as workmen that handle aright the Word of God. So as you go through and you meditate, and as you work and you study upon the Word of God, make sure you study to show yourselves approved of Him. I'll see you then. God bless.